Coming on the heels of this week's NATO summit where the 30 nation members agreed to a new cyber defense policy, we spoke to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg about whether the alliance is adequately prepared to respond to cyber attacks as well as new challenges from Russia and China. Watch.
We live in a much more competitive world where NATO is faced with many different threats and challenges at the same time. And we don't rank them, but we just have to be prepared to address all of them. We don't have the luxury of choosing either one or the other. Of course, for decades, NATO has addressed the Soviet Union, Russia. Russia is still a country which is behaves in an aggressive way against neighbors. We have seen cyber attacks against NATO allies. But the rise of China matters for our security because that really is shifting the global balance of power. NATO allies agreed for the first time a very clear and united position, both on the challenges and the opportunities, but also the challenges related to the rise of China. They are investing heavily in new modern military capabilities, and China doesn't share our values. So of course, that matters for NATO.
When it comes to cyber attacks, the United States and obviously other NATO nations, they endorsed a new cyber defense policy that cyber attacks on a NATO member could lead to the invocation of Article 5, which is essentially an attack on the entire organization. Does that mean that a cyber attack on one alliance nation is now considered an attack on all of them? And what type of specific attack rises to that level? For example, what we saw in the United States in recent months with the attack on the Colonial Pipeline and food processing plants, would that constitute an attack on the alliance?
So NATO's core task, core responsibility is to protect and defend all allies against any threat. And this is based on, as you refer to, Article 5 of our founding Washington Treaty that says that an attack on one will be regarded as an attack on all, that it's one for all and all for one. We have actually triggered that article, our collective defense clause, only once. And that was after a terrorist attack on the United States, 9/11. What we did a few years ago was to decide that a cyber attack can be as damaging, as dangerous as a kinetic attack in air, sea, land, any other military domain. And therefore we decided that a cyber attack can trigger Article 5, our collective defense clause. But we will maintain what we call strategic ambiguity, meaning that we'll never describe in detail for a potential adversary exactly when we trigger Article 5. That's the case when we address kinetic attacks, air, sea, land domains, but also, of course, the cyber domain. What we do is that we constantly are strengthening our cyber defenses, sharing best practices, and improving the way we both defend NATO networks, but also help allies to defend their own networks.
So I know that you're saying it's part of the strategic ambiguity, but would the Colonial Pipeline and ransomware attacks in the U.S. rise to that level? Has NATO even discussed attacks, and how would NATO respond? Would they respond in kind with a cyber attack of its own or not?
We will decide how we will respond. Of course, we can respond in cyber, but in the cyber domain, but we can also respond in any other domain. That's for us to decide when we make a decision to trigger Article 5. The main purpose of NATO is to prevent that from happening, is to have credible deterrence and defense, and the ability to defend our cyber networks in a way that means that we never end up in a situation where we need to trigger our collective defense clause.
All right, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Sir, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.